Okay, we're dealing with number 9 on the agenda, scrutiny of EU legislative proposals. Schedule A is COM 218 of 817, proposal for regulation of European Parliament Council amending regulations EU number 1305/2013 and EU number 1307/2013 as regards certain rules on direct payments and support for rural development in respect of the years 2019 and 2020. It is proposed that there are no subsidiarity concerns with COM 218. 817. It is also proposed that the proposal warrants no further scrutiny. Is that agreed? Thank you. Okay. Yeah, that's okay. Witnesses, just before we start the meeting, just my members and witnesses, those public eye, make sure the mobile phones are completely turned off, please, as they affect the broadcasting systems here in the committee room. We're discussing today the discussion of live exports. I'd like to welcome from the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine the officials, Dr. Paula Barry-Walsh, Deputy Chief Veterinary Officer, Mr. Dermot Murphy, Principal Officer, Ms. Marie Dunn, Principal Officer, Mr. Rob Doyle, Senior Veterinary Superintendent Veterinary Inspector, Mr. Dr. Dave Nolan, Senior Superintendent Veterinary Inspector, and Dr. James Casey, Veterinary Inspector, and thank them for the committee today to discuss the issue of live exports. Before we begin, I want to bring to your attention, witnesses are protected by absolute privilege in respect of the evidence you are to give to the committee. However, if you are directed by the committee to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter and you continue to do so, you are entitled thereafter only to qualified privilege in respect of your evidence. You are directed to only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings to be given, and you are asked to respect the parliamentary practice to the effect that, where possible, you should not criticise and make charges against any person or entity by name in such way as to make him or her identifiable. Members are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that members should not comment on or criticise and make charges against either a person outside the House or an official either by name in such way as to make him or her identifiable. Dr. Barry Walsh, I understand you're making the opening statement, and I now invite you to make your opening statement, please.
Thank you very much, Deputy, and thank you very much today for the invitation. I'd just like to say that live exports are a critical part of the infrastructure of our livestock industry. They play a significant role in stimulating price competition and provide an alternative market outlet for farmers. There are, however, commercial transactions which can be impacted by various factors. The live trade of animals is acknowledged to be a sensitive issue, subject to societal, geopolitical and socio-economic influences. DAFM facilitates this trade, recognises its importance to the agri-sector, while ensuring that live animal exports meet the highest welfare standards. DAFM takes its obligations to supervise the industry very seriously, ensuring compliance with these standards and exercising strict controls on the transport of live animals for export. All ships transporting animals undergo inspections and licensing by the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine. The handling, layeraging and loading of animals is carried out under veterinary supervision. All animals undergo health inspection prior to departure, and certification is issued by the official veterinarian only if the animals are deemed fit for transport and free of disease. In 2018, live exports totaled 246,226 head of cattle, up 31% from 188,334 in 2017. This change was driven by a significant increase in calf exports to other EU companies. Calf exports to Spain increased by 66% to over 72,500 head in 2018. Exports of Irish calves to Italy and the Netherlands also increased last year to over 12,500 head and 48,500 head respectively. Calf exports to Belgium increased from 4,200 to 13,000 head from 2017 to 2018. Almost 13,000 head of cattle were exported to Turkey last year, despite the currency challenges faced in that country. Ongoing work on market access for livestock trade. In April 2017, the Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine outlined a 7-point action plan to increase international market access for Irish food, drink and live exports. This focused on both the development of new third country markets, but also on ongoing work to maintain access to existing third country markets and to improve the terms of our existing access, which is also crucial. The maintenance and expansion of EU markets is also recognised as critical to the live export trade, and Ireland works closely with Board B on live export issues. In the context of market access for livestock, the Department, in the last 12 months, has engaged at a political, diplomatic and official technical level with a number of delegations from third countries, including Turkey, Algeria, Libya, Egypt, Kazakhstan and Qatar. New certificates were agreed with Libya and Qatar, which are now more favourable to Irish exports, whereby animals may be drawn from a larger cohort and they are aligned with bilateral certificates in the Member States. I'd like to clarify that Egypt's certificates are still being finalised. Revised certificates were also proposed to other markets and DAFM, while awaiting their response, are optimistic of a favourable outcome. In August 2018, a Libyan delegation visited Ireland, and following this, the Department reached agreement with the Libyan authorities on veterinary health certificates for the export of cattle. The Minister's decision to reduce the veterinary inspection fee payable on live exports of calves less than 3 months of age from €4.80 to €1.20 has brought greater equity in respect of fees payable per consignment. Animal welfare and compliance with the legislation. The Department provides strong oversight in respect of the welfare of animals being exported over land and by sea from Ireland through a comprehensive legislative framework, the Carriage of Livestock by Sea Regulations 2016, SI 356 of 2016 and Regulation EC number 1 of 2005 on the protection of animals during transport and related operations. In addition, as already mentioned, veterinary inspection is carried out on all animals prior to loading to ensure the fitness of the animals for transport. Irish legislative standards for sea transport are widely recognised by the EU Commission as being amongst the most effective and stringent legislation in force as regards transport by sea. Under the European Community's Animal Transport and Control Post Regulations 2006, the Department requires exporters to provide satellite navigation records and return all journey logs on completion of the journey. Furthermore, the Department does not approve journey logs from exporters for road transport for any livestock export where the destination country has an orange or red weather alert in place, or where a significant part of the transit route goes through an orange or red alert area. This is in addition to the annual ban on road transport of livestock to Greece, North Africa. And can I just clarify that in relation to Turkey, the Department doesn't allow road transport due to the potential delays at the border post, which could impact on animal welfare. Ireland continues to work closely with other EU member states and the World Organization for Animal Health, the OIE, with a view to improving animal welfare practices worldwide. In this regard, Ireland has reaffirmed its ongoing commitment to animal welfare through additional OIE multi-annual financial assistance to support its activities to enhance animal welfare worldwide. This additional support is to the tune of €75,000 per annum over the period of 2017 to 2020, and is focused on OIE initiatives in the area of slaughter in the regions of Eastern Europe, Middle East and North Africa, and in the area of whole journey scenarios by land and or sea involving inter-regional journeys. In addition, Ireland hosts technical assistance and information exchange meetings with third country representatives with a view to achieving improved welfare outcomes. And in that regard, Ireland is currently making arrangements to host such a visit in February of 2019. Challenges. There are challenges to be expected within the live export trade, and these challenges include the capacity of lairges in France. It's noted that lairge capacity in Cherbourg has already been increased in recent years from approximately 1,500 animals per day to 4,000 calves per day. Department officials are in ongoing communication with the Irish exporters with regard to the need for their cooperative management between each other to ensure that the lairage capacity at Cherbourg is optimised. Industry have been advised to make contact with their business partners in France to explore options around the increasing capacity at Cherbourg. Department officials continue to meet with ferry companies to explore new routes to mainland Europe or carrying livestock on existing routes to ensure that the greatest facilitation possible is afforded to livestock exporters in the important spring period. The pending approval of a new ferry will assist in addressing these issues. Department officials also engage with our own French counterparts in relation to animal welfare matters and the lairge capacity in Sherbrooke. The establishment of an exporter representative body would be a useful development in improving planning and cooperation between exporters. This would enhance their engagement with their French counterparts and especially with the existing owners of the facilities at Sherbrooke where additional capacity potentially exists. The Department continues to work with the Egyptian and Algerian authorities with a view to finalising health certs for these countries, and I will be glad to keep the Committee appraised on progress in these matters in the coming weeks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Barry Walsh. Now we'll take questions from the members in groups of 3, and then we'll come back to yourselves. Is that okay? The first 3 that have indicated are Deputy McConalogue, Deputy Cahill and Senator Lombard, in that order.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I'd like to thank Ms Barry Walsh and all the team from the Department of Agriculture for coming in today and for giving us the presentation and indeed answering our questions. Obviously, the position and role that live exports play in the beef sector is absolutely critical to its health, and particularly at a time whenever it is under so much pressure over the last number of months and year or so, it is ever more essential. And there is no doubt that across the country, around mart rings, the trade picks up, and the feedback from farmers in terms of the strength of the trade and indeed in terms of the return and prices paid is reflected by the health of the livestock market. And particularly, we have a real issue at the moment in relation to the number of the size of the kill in the country, which has been reaching up to 40,000 head a week, and the pressure that is putting on prices that farmers are getting as a result. So it is crucial that we, at the policy level, try and ensure that the pathway to live exports is as smooth as possible, but at all times we do have to be cognizant and have a high priority as well for ensuring the welfare of those animals that are being exported, and nobody more than farmers will want to ensure that that is the case. Can I ask you, in relation to, in particular, the live export of young calves over the last period of time, and it was particularly important last year as we see the growth in our dairy herd, that those young calves coming off the dairy herd actually are exported at a young age to ensure that the market isn't overwhelmed in terms of beef coming at slaughter age into our own beef market. But in relation to the numbers that were there last year, what is your assessment this year in relation to how those numbers are going to hold up and indeed be improved upon? And are you satisfied that in terms of the approval for boats to actually export them, and indeed in terms of the Department's engagement with regard to licences, and indeed particularly in terms of the issue of lairage in France, that we are going to be in a position to ensure that we build upon the numbers that were achieved last year and ensure that increased numbers get out this year in particular? In relation to the export certificates with countries for live export, and particularly northern African countries, you indicated a number of countries where revised licences had been agreed in the last new certificates in the last period of time, and you mentioned Egypt, Libya, and Qatar in particular, and that you're continuing to engage in Turkey, Algeria, Libya. Egypt, Kazakhstan and Qatar. With regard to those certificates which were revised to give farmers more favourable terms for export, can you highlight what changes were agreed that actually facilitated that? And certainly in terms of my engagement with the beef sector, feedback would have been coming previously that some of the terms and conditions that would have been on those export certificates were too onerous in terms of prior restrictions in advance, holding periods before cattle would be exported, and that made the viability of the exports less attractive, and indeed less attractive than they would have been for other exporting countries that would have had certificates with the same countries. That covers most of my questions. Thank you, Chairperson.
Next Deputy Cahill, please.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairman, like Deputy McConalogue, I'd like to thank Dr. Paula Barry-Walsh for her presentation to us. I suppose, and I'd like to welcome the rest of our delegation here today. I suppose, live exports were never of such critical importance to us, and, as the number of black and white calves increase, this safety valve is absolutely essential. I suppose, the fact that the numbers went up in 2018, I think is testament to the fact that the standards that we have in place here are of a satisfactory nature. Because, if our calves weren't arriving in a healthy state on the continent, we'd very soon lose our customers there. So I think, the standards that have been put in place by the department and they are there, I think, are working well. And, we have to ensure that, that they are, the live exporters obviously have to perform their job, and they want to do it as economically as possible. But it's essential that the calves arrive in a healthy condition, and obviously that is happening, otherwise figures wouldn't be on the increase. I suppose in the past, we had problems with our weanlings going to the continent, and, we ironed that out, and I was on board B at the time, and definitely we had health issues with our weanlings, and it was going to destroy our whole reputation. And, there was action taken as regards, having weanlings weaned and that before export. We have a lot of markets opened for our older stock, and there's been a lot of work put into it. But as has been said, there's not any significant amount of stock moving there. So I think we have to re-examine. What are the conditions are in place? Are they are they too stringent for the live exports to operate? As regards quarantine before animals move and whatever. And while we have to maintain our standards, we have to look on the economic viability of moving stock as well. So I think to put too onerous of conditions on a market is self-defeating in its purpose. We, I suppose, are disadvantaged in that we're the only country that has to travel by sea to get to mainland Europe. And do we know how much cattle travel from country to country in Europe? Say to the feedlots in Spain, for example. I had been on feedlots in Spain in the past, and they had animals on those feedlots from 4 or 5 different European countries. And how far our other animals travelling by road to those feedlots. And it's just, I think, from our own point of view, to be interested to see how many cattle are moving from different countries on the continent. The whole focus we definitely feel here is on our sea transport journeys. And is the same emphasis on other exporters on the continent who are travelling by land. Like this spring, we're going to have a record number of black and white calves on the ground, and it's absolutely essential that I suppose the starting at the moment, calving season is getting into full swing in all spring calving herds. And if we got a period of stormy weather, and that there was a backlog in the system and a layerage capacity on the continent, could it have a serious detrimental effect on the numbers of calves that we could export in any given week in the spring? And the market for these calves, in my view, is going to be completely dependent on live exports this spring, and our beef market in 2 years' time is going to be dependent on it as well. So the layerage capacity, I think, is one, and I think there should definitely be allowance made for the fact that if there's bad, if there's bad weather here, that there would be a significant build-up of stock at this side to get across. And I'd be just worried that the capacity figures that we see there just wouldn't be enough to cater for the huge volume of calves that we need to get onto the continent. I would be hearing from live exports that they have markets that could cater for an increase of 50% in calf numbers this spring to travel to the continent. Would the department be happy that that the facilities that we have in place would be able to cater for that increase in numbers, and that it would be able, that we could do it, I suppose, fairly seamlessly, and that that the layerage facilities would be able to cater for that kind of an increase in numbers. And as I said, I think we can stand over our record. As I said, we wouldn't be holding our customers on the continent if we weren't doing the job correctly and that calves weren't arriving in a healthy condition. I suppose just one thing that you're looking for the exporters to have one representative body, and that you would feel that would be useful. I suppose it's an interesting comment from the department, and I suppose they are competing against each other as regards markets, and I suppose it would be hard to get them under the one umbrella. But I could see reasons why, for the operational aspects of moving livestock, I would think that, they should have common sense and have the one umbrella body that could come and voice the concerns or issues that's facing them, rather than coming in an ad hoc manner to the department. So I think that would be useful. But I would commend the department for the the regulations that we have in place, and it's essential, as I said, especially on the older cattle. I think we probably need to look at the regulations there to see are we being over strenuous. And I know some of our customers might demand certain conditions, but if stock don't move, it's self-defeating. I think some countries that we have negotiated and trade with, and I think we should go back and re-examine why no business is happening. And I think in any country that we have agreed live exports with, and the movement of live exports, I think after a 6 or 12 month period, if there's nothing happening as regards movement of stock, that we should go back and re-examine the agreement that has been made to see what is wrong, whether it's economic reasons or whatever is causing the non-movement of stock.
Deputy Senator Lombard, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to, of course, welcome and acknowledge the actual representatives from the Department of Agriculture that are here this afternoon. Obviously, a very important issue when you look at the live trade. It's a really important leg of our beef industry itself. Down in my part of the world, we would black and white calves is probably the big name of the game. You're looking at an issue. Places like Bandon Mart, which is only a few miles away from me now, is proposing to have 2 sales on the day, which is it's never been heard of. We're almost having 2 sales in the week, one on the Monday, one on the actual Thursday, which shows you the actual demand and the output that they're predicting in the next few weeks. Such large numbers of black and white calves need to be exported off this island, and trying to get routes for that export is the biggest issue. It has to be acknowledged that 250,000 animals were moved last year, a very significant figure, up 31%. A lot of them would have been black and white calves, but there was and there is talks about issues regarding Irish ferries, in particular in Rosslare, about a route being changed before Christmas. What analysis have the department done about that route change itself? And you mentioned in your actual presentation that you're waiting for a new ferry, or a new ferry to be looked at. You might elaborate on where we are with the actual ferry services itself. I might be wrong now, but I don't think any of the live calves go through Cork Port. I don't think Brittany ferries are taking them. I think they're mainly heading to other ports. Is there potential that calves from the Munster region might have to go to Dublin Port to actually be exported? And would that create a significant barrier in actually getting calves to actual market itself? Or what is the market line that is potentially planned out for the animals? Like from our part of the world, you're going to have in the next 6 weeks over 2,500 to 3,000 black and white calves going to Bandon Mart and other marts in the district. It really is a significant impact to ensure we get those animals moved off. And Deputy Cahill mentioned a very important issue regarding weather and how weather could play an impact on getting calves off the island itself. We saw that last March when the snow hit, and it's hit very badly in the south of Ireland. We had a major backlog that affected calf prices and calves and age of calves for a considerable period of time. There was 2 or 3 weeks of major disruption to the actual livestock trade itself. How can we work within those time restraints of calf movements? Is there going to be leniency if we do have bad weather? There's even talk of bad weather coming the next few days. How can we ensure that we can actually get those calves off, that if there is an issue with time? Is there a way around this issue, and have we thought it through on the department level itself? Because we probably will have another spate of bad weather. It happened in a terrible time of the year for us last year. It is around the 8th or 10th of March. Major disruption all the way through for that 3 weeks, trying to get animals off with ferries cancelled and bad road conditions. where do you see the growth in the market? Do you see potential, like significant growth last year? Do you see more growth, more access? Where is the actual target markets that you've laid out? Or where do you predict the pitfalls will be trying to get calves off this island? And to me, it's about two things. It's about transportation and ferries, and the other issue is the layerages over in the actual continent itself. So I'm just wondering, is there capacity in layerages, and is there capacity with the ferry companies to ensure we can get access? Because without that, I would have a fear. But like, it was an exceptional year last year. We need to have those figures repeated, if not, improved upon, because even though we are probably a week behind in calving, the way the weather broke and everything else, I just think we are going to have exceptionally high numbers of black and white calves moving, in particularly from the next 4 to 5 weeks on, huge numbers. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Dr. Barry Walsh.
Thank you very much, Deputies. I'll take the questions and perhaps amalgamate some of them, and I may also refer, obviously, some to my colleagues here. Just taking the first question really was about the outlook and the growth in the trade over the next while. The department works with Board BIA, and Board BIA is involved in assessing the trade and the forecast for the trade for 2019, and it is considered to be a strong trade will emerge in 2019 for live exports. So there may be growth in both the calf element, and we would hope also in the other weanlings and store. Just last year, just to give you an idea, the principal markets for the Irish calves were Spain, took approximately 71,000, Netherlands took 48,000 calves, Belgium took 14,000 calves approximately, and France took 9,000 calves. So clearly, as you've said yourselves, getting the animals across to these countries is a critical issue. Now, the department supports the live trade very actively. It works with the exporters, and it will support the exporters in their own endeavours to manage the access to Europe in relation to getting the calves out. What I'll do in terms of the layerage in France, one of the questions related to what are the details around the layerage capacity and also the ferry capacity. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Rob Doyle.
Okay, James has been to France to visit with our French colleagues the layerage there. So the EU have already funded a very considerable increase in layerage capacity from approximately 1,500 calves to 4,000 calves per day. Now, our assessment is there is potentially space to increase capacity in one of the layerages should the operator wish to do so. So far he hasn't been particularly inclined to do so, but we have met with the IFA, and we've given them the contacts and the details, and they're visiting France next week to engage directly with the layerages. I mean, we've also engaged on numerous occasions with our French colleagues, so they understand the issues. So as Paula said, we do support the trade, we do understand the issue, but in terms of developing further layerage capacity in France, that is, it's a commercial issue, and we expect that the Irish exporters will engage directly with their service providers in France and ask them to, as a commercial entity, to increase capacity. In relation to ferry capacity, currently the ferry sails 3 days a week. There is more than enough capacity to meet what's available in Cherbourg. We expect a new ferry to be approved shortly. Someone asked, it has been inspected. There are some issues to be resolved, but it has been already approved for pets and horses, and we expect approval for cattle to follow. And we understand from the ferry company that ship will begin to sail to France in late March, and the good news about it is that it will sail on a 48-hour schedule. So currently sailings are Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So every second week they will be sailing 7 days a week. So that will that will increase capacity from 12,000 to 28,000 a week if all the lairage capacity is used. So that'll be a very significant increase in capacity, and that should take a lot of pressure off the system.
Thank you. If I might, one of the questions related to the certification of the countries, and particularly in relation to certification and how they're being, if you like, improved. So I'm going to ask my colleague Dave Nolan.
Thank you, Paula, and good afternoon, deputies. I deal with the issue of certification, and I suppose the question was asked, like, what changes are we looking for in certs? And broadly, they come under the age limits, or we try to increase the age limits on the certs. We look at the weight limits, and we try to have those increased as well. And we also look at limiting the quarantine period or holding period that has to apply in Ireland. And we have also removed testing requirements for diseases for which Ireland is free. But we have to remember that the negotiation for certs is customer driven, and actually they tell us what they want. And sometimes what we would like to achieve ourselves is not obtainable. However, with that in mind, we have had some successes, and particularly in the following markets. In relation to Libya, we've got a new cert agreed actually for breeding animals and separated it from slaughtered animals, and that was one combined cert before, which was proving very difficult. Again, there we got the age increased, and we got the cert, a lot of diseases removed from the old cert, and thankfully that was agreed in November of last year. The other one where we had some success is in Qatar. This is actually for sheep. And we've just agreed a new certificate there, which makes it easier to supply that market. Mostly the changes there have to do with disease conditions. The other one where there is some level of success, although yet incomplete, is Kazakhstan. There is an agreed EU cert with that part of the world, and we have just sent a new cert for a disease called Schmallenberg, and we await their return to us in relation to that. In relation to Egypt, we have got political agreement to the cert, but we still haven't got it signed off at official level. We expect that shortly, and here we've got a lot of changes to the old cert. The main reason for this is to ensure that the actual exporters can draw from a larger cohort of animals, so therefore being more competitive in the market. Because after all, when it comes down to price at the end of the day, and if you're not competitive in those markets, then you're not going to go there. In relation to Algeria, we've had a lot of interaction with Algeria, and I think it needs to be borne in mind that, if we engage with these foreign countries, we make proposals that suit the trade. We try to align conditions in our cert that they have with certs with other member states, for instance. So there's a level playing pitch. That is our goal. But sometimes they don't answer. They don't come back to us on it. So in relation to that, we intend possibly to carry a technical mission to that country this year with a view to examining and agreeing the actual wording in the cert. Now, whether we're successful or not remains to be seen. But that's just, deputies, are just a flavour of some of the work that's done. It's ongoing. It's time-consuming. But I would be an optimist and say that at the end of the day we'll get more favourable certs for Irish exports going forward. Thank you.
And if I could just add to that, just to say again that the Minister does have set in place a 7-point action plan in 2017, and as part of the overall market access programme, there is an ongoing and continuing examination of where markets may arise, where there may be potential to either create a new market or indeed expand an existing market. Sometimes these things depend on currency exchanges and various other economic issues in the particular countries, but between Board BIA and the Department, both the Veterinary International Trade Division and the Milk and Meat Policy, we're vigilant in terms of keeping an open mind on where new markets may arise. So that just refers to the growth in the market and how we actually deal with it. May I just refer, I will refer just about new routes. We also keep under examination any possible new routes, but keeping in mind again that ferry companies, their particular business models, they will have various different things to account for. So while we will keep on engaging with them, you know, sometimes nothing may happen. So if there's any other questions I've left out. With regard to the weather impact, just to mention that in relation to the transport of the animals, the primary concern obviously is the welfare of the animals, and that cannot be compromised under any circumstances. And indeed the sensitivity of the market demands that we ship animals only obviously when it is okay. So as you said, whether there's very bad weather, where there's snow or storms, there may be a backup or a build-up of animals. But as my colleague Rob Doyle has said, that in relation to the capacity, both with the new ferry coming online, we will have a capacity of approximately 80,000 per month to be able to carry out animals. And that aligned with the support we've given to the farming bodies and to the exporters in trying to facilitate their expansion of the lairage in Cherbourg. So these are the contingency, these are the things that are underpinning the trade and which will facilitate getting animals out even where we can expect bad weather during the winter.
And Senator Lombard, being from Cork, was concerned about having to bring calves to Dublin.
The ferry issue, I think there was supposed to be one for ferry.
I suppose we engage really regularly with the ferry companies because obviously they're a key component in this trade. And as Paula said, essentially they're commercial companies and they make commercial decisions. So, like one ferry company has made a commercial decision to sail from Dublin. And we've spoken to them about that, but they feel that in terms of trade, overall trade is more advantageous to them, and they've made that decision. So while we can, we've also spoken to the ferry companies about maybe sailing to other ports in France to try and alleviate the kind of pressure on Cherbourg. But again, they said for commercial reasons, it doesn't make sense just for livestock trade. They're very focused on their overall business.
How many ferry companies take actually animals?
2.
Okay. And then the question of the one export organisation that you floated in the last paragraph of your statement, is there any work being done on that, or are you driving that, or are you hoping that the exporters themselves will drive that?
If I could refer to a meeting that the Minister held in July of this year, it was stated and put forward by the Minister as being a useful option for the exporters to consider. And again, when we met the industry recently, it was put forward by ourselves. Now, we are very open to whatever model of a representative body they would wish to have. We would work with them. But if you take account of something like the expansion, the potential expansion of a lairage in Cherbourg, you can see that a united voice and one body, one person representing all the calf export, it does have its advantages. It also has its advantages in terms of talking as a body and indeed representing the very high standard of welfare, the investment they have made in this trade and how they actually do achieve very positive results in terms of animal welfare. So we feel there are advantages to them. It isn't an advantage just to the Department of Agriculture. We feel there are advantages to them in representing their own case and their own industry in having...
How many exporters would you be dealing with?
I'm going to say around 14, 15, but they have different areas of work, some may do weaning, some may do calves, some may do third countries, some hire ships. So there's different models within that.
Okay, roughly 14?
Approximately.
Okay. All right, the next group of questioners, Deputy Kenny, Senator Mulhern and Deputy Pringle.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And again, I'd like to welcome the delegation and your opening statement. A lot of the questions have been dealt with, but I'm interested in that capacity issue that you say that there could be up to for 80,000 animals to be shipped per month, which, if it were to be done for the 12 months, would be a 4-fold increase in what's there at present, which is, it would be a huge capacity. There was 246,000 and something exported last year, so it shows that there's huge capacity there. But obviously, it's something that people would be taken aback at if you were talking about something of that scale. I'd also like to get some information on the amount of calves that are being exported. I assume an awful lot of those are going to feedlots, and as to at what stage are they going to the feedlots at? And also in regard to the most of the destinations you're talking about, where the majority seems to be mainly in Europe, which would be countries that we're also exporting beef to in many cases. And would you have any indication as to what level of live export we'd be sending to them as regards the proportion of that as regards to what level of actual finished beef product would be exporting to those countries? In many cases, it's probably quite clear. I think most farmers would prefer if they felt that the animals were being bought by the factories and slaughtered in Ireland, and that the work was in Ireland rather than going elsewhere. And really, you know, it's often been pointed out that the existence of the live export trade is, to some extent, a solution to a problem that shouldn't exist, because we should have competition and capacity to process as much as possible here and keep that work in the country rather than sending it elsewhere. And I'd just like to get your comments on that as to where, and while I personally, I feel there will always be a need to have some level of live export, but I was a little bit taken aback at the scale you talked about when you said up to 80,000 animals per month would be a huge amount of animals we'll be talking about if that scale was to be utilised. Sorry? Calves. Okay, that's in calves. Okay. In regard to the issue of the exporters coming together in a single representative organisation, how many exporters are there at present? Have you a number there? How many individuals are actually engaged in that work? Are you talking about huge numbers, or are you talking about small enough? I imagine it's a pretty small bunch of people. We'd probably be able to bring them all in here, so that yeah. Easily enough. So I just wonder in regard to that, because I'm always conscious that we have in effect a small number of factories that are processing beef in the country and processing meat in the country, and they have their own representative organisation. And how much of that has been a benefit? Maybe it's a big benefit to the overall industry, but a lot of people question how much of a benefit it is to the primary producer when all these guys get working together. Do they work for their own interests, or do they work for the primary producer's interests? And I would just wonder the same in regard to this. Finally, the overall issue in regard to where we're going to go, because some of the journeys you're talking about, particularly for places like Egypt and Algeria and Turkey and that, are quite long journeys. And while it's clear that the people that buy this product want to buy a healthy animal, that's in their interest, and we have to make sure that a healthy animal arrives at that destination. And Ireland has a very good reputation in that, because the calves and the animals that are produced here are to the highest standard and are very healthy, and healthy leaving and healthy going, and that we maintain that all the way through. And I just wonder, in regard to a lot of the criticism there is of the live export trade, how much can you throw some truth on that as to what is the actual reality of the animal's journey and of the health in which they arrive at their final destination? Thank you, Chairman.
Deputy Senator Hearn, please.
Thanks, Chairman. A lot of points have been covered, but I mean, when you look at the reality of the oversupply to factories, to the meat factories, the stark economic reality for farmers is that we can't look to curtail markets. We have to ramp up live exports, and we have to find new markets. And I think that's particularly brought into sharp focus when you see figures given by Board B of 40,000 extra calves in the dairy herd. So I understand that from people in the business that you would need to be looking. There was an increase last year of 60,000 that you'd nearly need to be looking at 100,000 to cater for that, and so as to ensure that farmers who are going to the factories at the moment have an alternative and basically don't go out of business, and things are pretty dismal in that regard. And I suppose I know that you've covered markets and where there have been increases, but is there scope, like what sort of figures are you talking about as in projection for increase in exports, and where might we realistically see increase in existing markets and new markets that might take up that glut of animals that are there that need to be moved on and are in our own market at the moment? And then the other question I want to ask you is about Northern Ireland and the situation there where you have cattle who have Irish tags are going into factories there, and people are getting paid less for them solely on that basis. And you know, are issues been addressed? Are steps been taken to address that, or where is it at as regards Irish cattle being brought to Northern Ireland? Thanks.
Senator Deputy Pringle, please.
Thanks, Chairman. I'd like to thank the representatives for their contributions. It's been very interesting. A couple of questions I have. Just, I suppose, one is in relation to the dairy industry, and it has been mentioned already. Like the growth in the dairy industry is obviously creating a problem in terms of live exports as well, to make sure that those calves that are supplementary requirements are moved out. And I'm just wondering how much that impact is having, and then that also as well will impact on the, you say that they play a significant role in stimulating price competition. So if it's all been taken up with dealing with the calves and the dairy industry, the price competition part of the live export trade is obviously going to be undermined, and I think that's a detriment, a negative step. So I was just wondering how you view that, and how you view that working out and working through the process over the coming years or whatever. Just in relation to as well, then you said that and your contribution that the export to Turkey by road stopped because of the delays on the border on welfare grounds. And I'm just wondering, would there be any similar delays here in terms of Brexit and the dreaded Brexit, and it comes into everything, but would there be any similar concerns here in relation to delays at the points of export if that arises after Brexit? And if there is, how would you deal with that, and what would your intention be in relation to that? And just in relation to your also Libya focus comes up fairly often there in your opening contribution, and I'm just wondering which government in Libya you've actually done the deals, we've done the deals with, because I think that might have an impact. And do you monitor actually what happens in terms of where the live traded animals are going and stuff like that there, and especially to a country like Libya that is war torn at the moment, and it'd just be interesting in hearing in relation to that. Also, just in your presentation there as well, you mentioned that the reduction in price for inspections was reduced from €4.80 to €1.20. That's a very significant reduction in price, and I'm just wondering, does that have any impact in terms of the actual examination that takes place in relation to cattle? And if not, then why was the price so high in the first place? And maybe it's a signal of, in terms of the increased trade that is reducing, and I would think then that means that the department actually is playing a role in terms of the impacting on the trade as well. And also just then as well, you mentioned that you checked on health grounds and stuff like that there, but I just wonder how many animals have been stopped on health grounds in the last year. I know you give the figures of how many have been exported and stuff like that there. I just wonder, has there been any stopped on health grounds as well? Thank you.
Thanks. And Senator Daly, please.
Thanks, Chair, and apologies for being late. I was at another engagement. Just briefly, like my reading of the scrutiny in the EU at the moment is based on the animal welfare conditions in the country of arrival, non-EU countries. And I'd just like to know, I'm very impressed with the report here, and I do know from experience that we are on top of our game, and the department scrutinise everything in its fullness, and that the health and welfare of the animals are 100%, and their travelling conditions are 100%. But when you're doing negotiating certificates or licences, how far after the arrival at the designated destination do you go in before you will come to an agreement on a certificate or on a licence, like with regard to where the animal ends up and the welfare issues thereafter? I say that seems to be what's flagging the issue here, and how much knowledge do we have of that?
Senator. Okay, Dr. Barry Walsh, when you're ready.
Thank you. I'll just go back. One of the first points we made was about the capacity of 80,000 per month. I just want to emphasise that that relates to calves for the seasonal period. It wouldn't reflect the capacity to export 80,000 weanlings and other animals. That capacity is probably in around 5,000 maximum weekly throughout the year when one comes to that's what it's working out as on average. So in some respects what I'm saying is that the capacity of 80,000 is a response to the possible demand this year, and it's a response from the needs of industry, and we support industry in trying to enable what exports can be done of calves, but it doesn't, as I say, reflect all. It was also mentioned about in terms of feedlots and where the calves are going. I think I will refer to my colleague.
So in essence, that's a very particular trade. Like, so it is male dairy calves, and they go to, in essence, they are for veal production, either two types of veal production, milk veal or rosé veal, and the countries then are mainly Spain, Belgium, were the big importers. And in essence, it takes up dairy cows are calving now. By the end of February, we'd probably have 500,000 calved, and so the calving, compact calving, has been the aim for the last few years. So we just have a short period with high volumes of calves. So at peak season, with ferries sailing 7 days, we'd expect to export 28,000 calves in a week. And then the other days where it's 3 days a week, it's 12. So combine that, you get to 80,000 a month. So at full capacity from March, we should be able to export in 2 months the equivalent of what calves we exported last year. And then, capacity over and above that.
Just going back, it was raised in relation to the export of live animals and the export of meat, and why we need it and what is the relationship around it. Again, for the department, the Minister has put forward an action plan in relation to the support of market access. And within that, there is both a willingness to expand the markets for meat as well as those for live animals. So there is actually a dual process going on. The department is involved in engaging in opening the markets, negotiating the most favourable certificate that it can, and that enables the trade. At that point, what happens is that the industry itself will respond to the market forces. So if there are meat trade, if there is a meat trade, well, they will avail of that, and equally if there's a live animal trade, that will be availed of. Sometimes the balance between the two may fluctuate, and it will differ widely between countries. So, I mean, that's the way it's approached. We enable trade, and industry will respond and be commercially active. The issue again about how many exporters, it is a small number, approximately 15 or less, but just to make the point that there is behind that an industry of assembly owners, transporter, haulage and various other things, so it does support the agri-sector, and it is of value to the wider agri-sector, more so than the livelihood of 15 people. The representative organisation was mentioned just in terms of the value for such a small number. Just to reiterate, I think the feeling is that if they get together, if they have a person who can speak in relation, very much in relation to stating the welfare standards they have, making their own case and being able to engage with industry in other countries, it would appear to have value, and we would see that value at the moment in terms of them being active in trying to expand the lairage capacity in Cherbourg. There was another question about the long trips. and in terms of the truth around the issues. Now, I think I'll go back to Rob on that one.
Yeah. So, in essence, the bulk of the long journeys are they're by dedicated livestock carrier by sea. So, Ireland is well recognised to have the highest standard in the world. We have a specific piece of legislation by which we approve ships. We have 2 veterinary inspectors, and we work with marine engineers to approve ships. So all that trade is it's from Irish ports to Turkish ports, and then the number of cattle depends on the size of the ship. One of the interesting points that we've noticed is that the exporters are paid on the weight of the animals delivered. They generally put the cattle going to Turkey, they're put on a special diet a couple of weeks before they go while they're in quarantine, and they're fed that on the ship. And a lot of the exporters have reported the cattle have actually put on weight on the ships. So cattle whose welfare is compromised do not thrive. So currently, for those long trips to Turkey, that is the only form of transport the department will approve.
How long?
It depends. 10 to 12 days, yeah.
If I'll go back, a point was raised about the Northern Irish cattle, the nomad cattle. Currently, the labelling of meat is governed by EU rules, which are origin-based, which must say born, reared, slaughtered. And if the origin of the animal is born, reared and slaughtered in Ireland, you can put in origin Ireland. Equally, it'll be UK is the only other jurisdiction. So if Irish animals go up to Northern Ireland, the labelling, which will be born in one jurisdiction, reared in one jurisdiction, and then they would be slaughtered in another jurisdiction. The commercial operations do not favour having that type of label. They prefer it to be an origin label, origin UK. So in that context, the European legislation prevails in determining what way that labelling occurs. The other point was just in relation to the decrease in price for the fee from 480 to 120 for calves. It was considered to be an issue in relation to equity. The payment of 480 was originally for a bovine. And at that point, going back many years, there wasn't a particularly big trade in calves. But as the trade became more active, it was pointed out that proportionately, relative to the amount of work, the amount of time, that it was very expensive. So for equities, for the sake of equity, the differentiation was made in relation to the prices. Another point raised was in relation to Brexit. Now, I suppose, can I just make the point I cannot specify what type of a Brexit happens or anything. I won't be going there today. I won't reveal it. But maybe it's very easy, because just to make the point, when we're talking about our calves and when we're talking about our weanlings and our stores, they are not. Brexit will be irrelevant because they leave. Our calves go intra-community. They will continue to be intra-community, there will be no impact. And equally, the ships that will go, let's say, to Turkey, there is no impact in terms of any type of Brexit per se. How many animals are stopped? Can I just reiterate again that in line with ensuring that the welfare standards, the welfare of the animals is the first priority, all animals are inspected prior to loading. They're inspected in the lairage prior to loading by veterinary inspectors on duty. There are documentary checks, identity checks and health checks. And no animal, unless it is deemed fit to travel and free of disease, is allowed go on. As it happens, the number of animals that are rejected, if they're rejected, it's primarily in relation to some documentary issue where perhaps an incorrect card or the owner isn't registered or BV tests might not be put on. So there are very small numbers rejected in the context of health. But if necessary, they will be rejected. I'm going to refer to... Yeah.
1-2% maximum.
The issue of the question arose there, I think it was Deputy Kenny, about where the actual calves go. With the feedlots, is there a percentage? Do you have a breakdown on that particular figure? Would you have that information?
All
Calves, and I presume you meant other livestock as well, Deputy, did you?
well, certainly all the calves go for veal production, and then the other calves, or the other cattle, it depends. So we export production cattle, we export some fat cattle, we export breeding cattle. You know, there's quite a trade in high quality breeding animals. We've exported a good few to Libya, Kazakhstan. So it really depends on what the cattle are destined for on arrival.
Okay. And I think you have nearly Deputy Penrose, or sorry, Pringle, Libya.
Libya and the price reduction.
Yeah, I think she mentioned the price reduction.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Libya, yes. Libya, yes. You asked about monitoring them and where they're going after they get to Libya.
Senator Daly.
Sorry?
That was Senator Daly.
Oh, sorry, dear. What was it?
The OIE is the issue there.
Sorry, yes. Well, in terms of the overall context of how Ireland, if you like, supports animal welfare, it's currently engages with the OIE, and it, as I mentioned in the earlier statement, it gives a support of 75,000 per year to for the years 2017 to 2020, and during the course of that time, that money will go towards enhancing animal welfare standards in third countries. As well as that, Ireland and our own officers engage in technical assistance and information exchange programmes, and these technical assistance programmes would be where personnel come from third countries to see our systems and where we can actually, we would believe, show them best practice, and we have such a visit coming at the end of February from a third country, one of the third countries with which we trade. So we are very active in trying to support the European Union and in promulgating best practice while ensuring that our own welfare standards obviously meet those very standards.
Okay. Deputy Pringle.
Chairman, just in relation to the question in relation to Libya was, I mean, as far as I understand it, there isn't a functioning government there, or if there is, it can change. Not there. How do we deal with those situations?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Deputy. I had a note of that in my book here. Yeah, we dealt with the National Committee of Animal Health and with a particular doctor there, and the thing was, he was actually the same gentleman that entered into negotiations with Ireland for the old certificate before the turmoil started. So he's well regarded in the community, I understand, but we have to bear in mind that there are a number of factions there. But this is the same gentleman representing the same well-known authority within Libya. So we thought we were talking to the right people.
Okay. Deputy McConalogue.
Chairperson, in relation to, there has obviously the Turkish trade has diminished significantly due to currency issues in the last year or so, but it was a significant contributor to live exports the previous year. There has been proposals put previously in relation to additional land routes to Turkey. I know you indicated in your earlier comments in relation to concerns with regard to the Turkish border, but if you could just elaborate a bit in relation to the viability of any potential additional land routes and the situation around the border there. Thank you.
So the border crossing from Bulgaria to Turkey, which is essentially the only border crossing that cattle can be cleared through, is a particularly difficult crossing. There are different operating hours on the Turkish and Bulgarian sides, and there has been very significant attention from welfare organisations on that border, with multiple reports of welfare violations, cattle being held there in very high temperatures for long periods, no water. And essentially the welfare risk to the animals and the reputational risk to Ireland is simply too great for us to prove animals on that route.
Okay. Senator Lombard, question?
Just following on from a comment there about, it was to do with Brexit and more to do with UK market, and particularly with breeding dairy stock. There's a significant market, in particular in the southern side of, depending on the currency now, there might be nothing one year and big fluctuation the next year. Regarding that actual market itself, and particularly in calf heifers, dairy stock moving to the UK, how would or what will the impact be, or have we thought through, and what is the preparation regarding how we can align our markets and how we can align our borders around such an issue of a hard Brexit itself? What preparation work have been done? Because even though there's no calves going, the dairy industry itself would have a significant interest in accessing, particularly the UK market with Frisian heifers.
Well, I'll deal with it in the context of animal and animal risk. The current situation is that in intra-community trade, it is actually already obligatory to certify animals, whether they're coming north or south or going across to the UK mainland, and vice versa. Anything coming in at the moment will actually be certified. The reason for the certification is obviously the protection of animal health and indeed animal welfare, and the protection of public health in the context of any transmissible diseases. So Ireland is freely able at the moment to trade with the UK and indeed with Northern Ireland. I can't speculate as to a Brexit type of arrangement, but what I can say is that one could say, without too much speculation, that the animal risk will be largely the same, and that if certification is a requirement, Ireland is likely to be able to continue such things, and equally Ireland would be governed by ensuring that it does get its own guarantees around animal health and safety, or animal health and welfare. So I cannot speculate as to Brexit, but the current situation gives good reason to believe there should be no risk.
Okay. No further questions. I thank Ms Barry Walsh and your colleagues for coming before the committee today and giving us a very good understanding of where things are with the whole live export trade. It's obviously something that's very important to the whole beef industry as we move forward over the next number of years. Again, thank you very much for coming before the committee today and giving us an understanding of what it is. And as there's no further business, the meeting stands adjourned until this day, 2 weeks, the 12th of February at 3:30. Thank you very much.